So spring is just around the corner, and it's a busy time for those of us in school gardens, and we're getting excited to plant outside, and there's lots of steps we need to do first inside and preparing the garden outside. So today we're going to look at a couple of those big projects. One, we're going to be looking at starting seedlings indoors, and then we're going to be looking at building your garden beds outdoors. For those of you that I haven't met before, my name is Tessa, and I am the Central Island Community Animator with Farm to School BC. I worked before this role as an outdoor educator, as a classroom teacher, as a community coordinator, and as a farmer. And it's awesome that I get to wear all these hats at the same time in this job with Farm to School BC. Before we start our workshop, I'd like to acknowledge that today I'm calling in from my home on the traditional unceded territory of the Cowetsa Nation and the Hulkaminum speaking people who have lived on this land since time immemorial. As a second-generation settler living on this land that is the lifeline of the Cowetsa Nation, it's my commitment to be part of reconciliation in my community. If folks would like to also share their territories that they're calling in from, it'd be great to do that. You can do so in the chat. And I have the pleasure of co-presenting with Sonya, and I'm going to pass it over to her to introduce herself.
Thanks, Tessa. Thanks for welcoming us here. White, my name is Sonya, and I am the regional animator for the Kamloops region. And I'm calling in or zooming in from Shuswap, the territory of the Shuswap people. I live here in Kamloops, which is known as Tecumloops, or has its name as Tecumloops, and it's the confluence of the North and South Thompson rivers. It's a place that holds a lot of history and value to both the Shuswap people and regional settlers, and I feel humbled to share this space with many humans and more than human beings, and I'm on this long-term journey to continue to learn about my physical spaces here in the grasslands. And I am rounding up my second year in my role at Farm School BC, and I have a background in outdoor education. So I actually will be chatting a little bit today with my outdoor educator hat on. But we're going to go over a little bit more about Farm to School BC before we get started. So Farm to School BC is a program that brings healthy, local, and sustainable food into schools across British Columbia. We provide students with hands-on learning opportunities that develop food literacy. And we strengthen the local food system by striving to enhance school and community connectedness. Farm to School BC is a program of the Public Health Association of BC and supported by the province of British Columbia. Here's a map of our regional hubs across BC. The regional hubs are coordinated by a local community animator. There's lots of us on this call today if you want to give a little wave. We also are supported by our stakeholders and our community partners. If you don't see your district on the map, that's okay. We're still here to support you. We're still growing as an organization, and we just link you in and connect you to the nearest animator to your district. So here's a little overview of the year ahead for our workshop series. For those of you who attended last year, you can find the workshop themes. They're similar to last year, but we brought in mentors to have a little bit of a Q&A session that's longer and based on like our lived experiences. So just so you know, at the end of today, we'll have like a solid 20 minutes with our mentors to chat to us. And speaking of workshops and series, here's our April workshop. So please don't hesitate to register now if you'd like. We're going to be focusing on outdoor planting seedlings outside, student engagement, and strategies for time management, as well as season extension and early spring planting. Okay, great. Tessa, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sonya. Thanks for the preamble. Time to dive into our topic now.
Oh, you're muted, Tessa.
These hours go quick. So here we go. For our workshop agenda today, this is the time of year that many of us get antsy to start seeding and want to get ready to plant. So we're going to be talking about how to start those seedlings indoors, to grow the seedlings in your classroom, and then transfer them outdoors into your school garden. We're also going to be looking at how you build your garden outside, how you prepare the soil for that. And then we're going to see that theory in action when we bring in our community mentors from Salmon Arm to talk about their experiences. We will hold space for them to share about their projects, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end of that where you can add your questions to them. If you would like to have questions as they pop up, just put those into the chat and Sonya will bring them up during the Q&A. So please, as you're thinking of questions, as the presentation goes, pop those questions in the chat and then we'll circle back around to them at the Q&A period at the end. Also a reminder with our workshop agenda that these are similar themes that were discussed last year at our School Garden Mentorship workshop. So we encourage you, if you want to dive deeper into these topics, take a look at March's workshop last year, and we will put in the chat there a link to our Farm to School BC YouTube channel, which has all the playlists for the School Garden Mentorship for last year and the year before. So you can dive as deep as you want into this topic of growing seedlings inside and building your garden outside. So this month we have mentors joining us from South Canoe Outdoor School in Salmon Arm. Geoff Stiles and Ceren will be joining us, and Sonya will introduce them in full later. But just to give you a little teaser, Geoff and Ceren are founding members and directors of the Shuswap Outdoor Learning Foundation, and they're also full-time teachers with the Canoe Outdoor Learning Program at South Canoe Elementary. Geoff and Ceren will be joined by Sonya, who also worked at South Canoe Elementary, and they'll discuss their process for building the garden at South Canoe. So our first topic, growing seedlings in the classroom. Many gardeners start seeds indoors to give them a head start on the growing season, and that's also a reason why many school gardeners do as well. But the benefits of starting seedlings in your classroom go beyond that. So to start us off, I just want to share some of the reasons why I've enjoyed starting seedlings in my classroom and in hearing from other educators as well. So first of all, having seedlings in your classroom allows students to engage in the growing experience in a very observable space. So having seedlings right in your classroom, the students are observing those seedlings on a daily basis and really starting to tune into the plant life cycle and build an attachment and connection to those plants. In doing so, I find it really engages students' sense of curiosity and wonder as they watch the first leaves come up. And then the second pair of leaves that look different than the first leaves, why is that? We start seeing them ask questions about the seedlings and engage in that growing process. It also beautifies the class. I always love it in the early spring when it's time to set up the indoor grow station and make a corner of my classroom come alive with plants. So it brings really nice energy into the class. It can also be a great opportunity to engage students in self-regulation and core competency development. Having those regular routines of taking care of those plants, monitoring the watering, monitoring the plants is a chance for students to engage in social responsibility in the classroom. And then I also find some students just really need to be able to go over to the grow station, mist the plants with some water, take a moment out of whatever they're up to in the day in the class. And that can be a really nice calming experience for students as well. It can save money for the garden. Seeds are cheaper to buy than seedlings. So if you're working with a tight budget, it can be nice for that if you already have the grow station set up. You can also grow unique varieties. There's more diversity in seeds than there is in seedlings. You can have more control over all the inputs in your garden. So if you are wanting to grow organically, you can have control over that. And if you're dreaming big scale, you can also use those seedlings as a fundraiser, and we'll chat about that in a moment. So I'm going to share a few examples here of what an indoor grow station could look like in the hopes that it might inspire you or help you envision what this could look like in your classroom. So first of all, a common way that grow stations are set up in classrooms is using shelving that's perhaps already in your classroom or shelving that you bring into your classroom. I often see this metal shelving, the picture on the left there. You can get it at Costco or Canadian Tire. You can adjust the height of the shelves so you can set it up to work for your seedling trays and your lights. That can be a good solution, or you can have a more purpose-built shelf like the one on the right there. If you don't already have a shelf or you're wanting a smaller setup, you can build an independent grow station, and really you just need anything that you can hang a light off of and have a tray underneath. So that could be built out of wood, it could be built out of PVC, which is the two pictures here, but really anything that can hold a light will work. If you want to get even simpler, lots of grow lights that you purchase come with little wire stands and you're ready to go just by purchasing the light. And you can see here in the picture on the right, that's a library at Cedar Secondary School in South Nanaimo. And they have a little purchase grow station in their library. And it brings a wonderful energy to the library to see little seedlings growing. And that was actually a student-led project. A student received a grant for that and put these grow stations around the school. So hopefully now you have a vision of, okay, what could a grow station look like in a classroom? And so in order to get into the nitty gritty, we're going to direct you towards a recording that Farm to School BC and Farm to Cafeteria Canada recently partnered to record a two-part series about indoor growing. And the second workshop in the series is all about growing in the classroom. So in order to save time today, so we can have more time for our other topics, we're going to refer you over to this workshop. If you're keen to get started, it'll go over how to build a grow station, the soil you need, the trays you need, the type of lights and timers and all those details in order to set up a grow station in your classroom. So there's a link for that in the chat. For other resources too, we're going to direct you towards the Indoor Grow Guide, which is on our Farm to School BC website. This was a growing guide put together by Farm to School BC in combination with Recycling and Environmental Action Planning, a nonprofit up in Prince George. There's some wonderful examples of indoor growing in schools in their northern communities. They have a much shorter growing season, and to align the growing season with the school season, they can really take advantage of indoor growing opportunities. So out of some of those, our community animator up north has created this indoor grow guide. So I recommend checking that out to help support your indoor growing. Lastly, I just want to mention the rich opportunity for connecting to curriculum with indoor growing. There's many different ways that indoor growing can connect into curriculum, and I wanted to share a few that I've noticed in the classroom. One is with the daily tasks of watering and other seedling care. I feel like that daily seedling care can really help connect with core competency development and just having students have a purpose and a role within the classroom. So there's lots of different watering schedules or other kind of schedules you can create to help engage your students in this task. And in terms of supporting students with ensuring that they're watering sufficiently, there's a lot of tips in the workshop recorded by Farm to Cafeteria Canada and Farm to School BC that I referenced a couple slides ago to really ensure that students are doing watering to support the best seedling growth. Secondly, there can be a great opportunity for science connections with plant monitoring. Students can be encouraged to look at the plants daily and record how tall are they growing, are there any signs of insects on the plants, are the leaves changing color, and look in different ways that daily monitoring can help inform an assessment of the overall plant health. And so we'll put a link towards one of those records that you could use with your class, but it can just be a really nice way of the students having a purpose to check in on those seedlings every day. With that, if you're recording the height too, there's so many different opportunities in terms of graphing and recording those heights of those seedlings in different ways. If you want to dive even deeper into science projects, Farm to School BC created a resource called Garden in a Box, and it's a very in-depth unit of how to use an indoor grow setup to test the scientific method and for students to develop experiments. So if you want to control different variables within your indoor grow setup, I recommend taking a look at the Farm to School BC Garden in a Box unit. You can do the whole unit with your class, or you can pull apart different lessons within it to help connect a science inquiry project to your indoor grow setup. Lastly, if you want to dream big, there's some wonderful opportunities for connecting your indoor growing out into the community. And one method that we see is schools hosting seedling fundraisers. So using the seedlings that they have grown in the classroom and hosting a fundraiser and using those funds to cycle back into the school garden. So that's a really quick overview of indoor growing. We didn't want to spend too much time on it because there's that great resource that we put out just last month with Farm to Cafeteria Canada on indoor growing. So if you're curious, please take a look at that and that'll help you design a setup for your class. And I'm going to pass it back over to Sonya.
Thanks, Tessa. That was lovely. I love all the kid photos in there. So we just wanted to share these two tiny micro videos from a lovely grower at the Kamloops Farmers Market. Their name is Janelle, and they have a really beautiful tiny property right here in the city where they have a unique grow space. So Janelle is not in a classroom, but what I love about Janelle's setup is it is really transferable to like unique spaces you might be growing in. So Tessa, I'll let you start playing that first short video. Janelle's very enthusiastic, and we have a whole video that's like 3 minutes that we'll loop into our resource sheet for you.
Hi, my name is Janelle Norman, and you are in my grow room at West End Tiny Farm. So if you want to come on in, I will show you a little bit about how I do things around here. Hi, my name is Janelle. So in the grow room, I have all of my microgreens and flower starts growing on these baker's racks. I normally have that one set up as well, but it's my slow season, so right now it's just sitting there used for storage. So I have shop lighting, which is simple LED shop lighting. Don't need anything fancy for microgreens because they only grow for 2 weeks, so you don't need anything broad spectrum. Just keep it simple for these guys.
I just wanted to mention Janelle's videos are great, and like Sonya mentioned, they'll all be on our Farm to School BC website. She's looking more at growing microgreens and starting seedlings indoors. And one of the great things about if you are investing a setup to grow indoor seedlings is come next fall, winter, perhaps you can use that same setup to grow microgreens. So whether your entry point is microgreens or seedlings, the setup that you build can be very transferable to both. So a great opportunity to take it to the next step. And I'll pass it back to you, Sonya.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So we're gonna talk about building, and I don't know about you, but I got power tools for Christmas, so this is like really applicable for me. All right, go ahead for the next slide, Tessa. So there are multiple slides. Oh, sorry, I skipped a tiny bit of content there. That's okay. There's multiple styles of garden beds, but here are some common ones. There's pros and cons to each, but along your growing journey, I'm sure you're going to find the one that suits the needs of both your students and your project. So we're going to focus on the three here, on raised beds, planter beds, and grow sacks. So raised beds, the pros are they are an open box and the roots can actually connect to the soil below. Also, you're having some, there's some ease to like weed management with this as well. And you won't be having students like step in these because there's actually like a defined perimeter around them. I also find that planter boxes can be useful when like mapping your garden in a shared space, and you can label them really clearly. Some of the cons are that the taller boxes can get pretty expensive. So a 6x3 foot bed with soil can potentially be $100. And I'm not sure if that's like taking into consideration the price of wood inflation lately. Like I think that fluctuates depending on the region we're in. But one of the reasons you do want to elevate your boxes is that you might have little to no topsoil. So you want to get out there and dig up the area before planting. But for the most part, your garden beds will not need to be more than 8 inches in height as long as you have some topsoil. So you can build your raised beds any size you'd like, but we want to recommend to keep the width of the box no wider than 36 inches, just for ease of accessing it with students, like when you're bending over and coming in from 2 sides. In terms of the length, if your box is more than 8 feet in length, you should consider posts in the corners and a cross beam to prevent bowing and flexing in your wood. Beds that are 8 feet or less shouldn't really require either of those when it comes to stability. All right, go for it, Tessa. Do we use nails or screws? Well, either work, but nails are permanent, so you want to keep that in mind. And whichever you go with, make sure they're 4 inches in length at least. But I mentioned in the last slide that if your beds are 8 feet or smaller, your corners can connect like this up here. And lastly, I want to encourage you to use wood that's closer to 2 inches in thickness. Thinner is weaker, and we will talk about that in the South Canoe story about the thickness of our wood. So planter boxes. Typically, planter boxes have closed bottoms and are deep enough for the plants to expand their roots into. They're typically 2 feet or higher, often with a lip, and that can be really great because there's a place to lean on or a place to sit on. But you're not always relying on the ground for open space for those roots. We recommend cedar if you can. Those can also be expensive when it comes to the cost of cedar. But in this situation, especially with this setup here, they're really easy for like seating and mobility and access, but they can be expensive. Like adding that extra height and putting the bottom on can really, those costs can really add up. You can add fabric to the sides and the bottom to better retain the soil from eroding. And a staple gun will do the trick. That photo right there is just common landscape fabric. It comes in really large rolls, but you can also use potato or coffee sacks. So here's an example of some of these seating areas in this outdoor classroom space that's made of these planter boxes. They really also can help students have like unique perspectives because they're a lot higher. And I just think that like what is available to those students right there, they're going to pay more attention to and observe when it's right at a perfect height for them. So just some tips when growing in wood. You want to get a volunteer that has some tools or expertise. So not a rookie who just got power tools for Christmas. You want to have someone to really support you on that journey, and really please don't use treated wood if you can manage it, just because we're considering what we're actually growing in and what will be infiltrating into our vegetables. Cedar is the longest lasting, but you can also stagger when your beds are built so that you're not replacing them at the exact same time. And as we said, or as I said before, try to get at least 2 inches thick, and think about that height of beds when you're deciding to build up that height in a vertical way. What is your intention with that? And lastly, just a small introduction to grow sacks here. They're cheap and they're easy to install. They are transportable. And if you don't know what a grow sack is, it's a woven sack that's permeable. They come in lots of different sizes. They're measured in gallons. The ones in these pictures are 15 gallons and cost between $8 to $20, depending on the brand. And you can grow any annual vegetable in them. 15-gallon can handle tomatoes and squash. And the nice thing about this model is that, as I mentioned, you can move it. They do get heavy when they're saturated with water, but in terms of thinking about your school year or even thinking about the summertime, it's really great to consider that. Okay, so we're going to spend a hot minute talking about installation. And when I'm talking about installation, we are referring to preparing the soil and tending the beds. So thinking about preparing your ground underneath the bed, like a lot of us might be using grass or like have access to grass. So let's think about what that might look like afterwards once we're growing. And this is a beautiful before and after photo. I love these. It's like so aesthetically pleasing. This is David Thompson Secondary School. This is everyone's dream. This is what we're all doing right now, right, Tessa? Okay. But some ways you can think about prepping that grass is using a sod cutter or with a tarp. So this tarp can do a really mass quick kill with heat, which is fantastic. But you really want to try to do this in the previous year if you can, and then also especially with lasagna gardening, you want to do it the previous fall, so it gives time for things to decompose. Or you can use a hybrid approach, which is both like cardboard and topsoil. For those who don't know, lasagna gardening is exactly what it sounds like. You're layering on different layers of browns and greens, and it's going to break down over time, and then you're going to have some lovely, nutritious and rich soil. Speaking of soil, make sure to welcome your soil in a thoughtful and considerate way. So you want to think about that you want to be there when it's delivered. You want to dump it close to your garden. You want to place a tarp underneath it so you can transport it eventually when it's a more manageable weight. And you also want to think about how you can cover it from rain if you're going to get a massive amount of moisture being added to it. And think about what you might use to transport it, like wheelbarrows and buckets. You want to have those on hand. Okay, and then lastly, really quickly, just going to mention irrigation. We're going to talk more about irrigation in our next workshop, but if you have the opportunity to install in-ground irrigation, you will not regret it. And it is going to save you time and effort, and timers are fantastic things to know about, but you wanted to be doing that in conjunction with your garden beds. And the reality is sometimes getting those things lined up perfectly isn't always possible. So we can talk about watering systems even potentially here with our guests and what we use to make that efficient. Okay, Tessa. Ah, great. Okay, whew, we did it. Just a minute. Okay, I'm putting on my educator hat. Hi, it's me, Sonya. I just wanted to transition to wear my teacher hat. I'm not an active teacher at South New anymore, but it's where I started my teaching journey. And I was working there for about 2 years with Geoff and Ceren, who are here with us today. I just wanted to say that this was my first exposure, like this is my first year of engagement in this community school. And there's so many things to say, but I'm noticing our time, and I just want to see if we want to transition to let Geoff chat to us. Geoff, do you want to unmute yourself? And actually, you're labeled as Sonya Rokosh because I sent you the link. That's okay, but that's Geoff. So Geoff, I might just let you take over because I'm
Thank
just
you.
going to chatty Cathy. Yeah.
Thank
But
you.
I'm
I
here to
didn't have
support you.
the snappy transition hat, so I'm glad you did that.
Exactly.
So yeah. Hello, everybody. Coming to you from South Canoe Elementary outdoor learning program. We're in the Shuswap territory. We're kind of actually right on the border of Nisconlith and Splatcheen. So it's a nice place to be. Lots of interesting people to chat with, and a lot of folks who know a lot about the land around here, which we're trying to learn about too through our gardening efforts. So I want to actually thank you, Sonya, for asking us to join you, because Jaren and I chatted on the weekend about all of our gardening, and we began to make a list of all the things that have sprouted, so to speak, from having gardens on our school grounds. And actually, we were quite surprised how many fantastic things have come from just having a garden. So I'll try to be quick. We'll just kind of go through a couple things from our past. So we're in year 6 of our school. Happily, we had Sonya here for a couple of years of those 6, which was awesome. And of course, outdoor learning school, K-8, we're 145 kids right now, 7 divisions, and kids go to high school from our school directly. In the beginning, it became quite obvious that of course, we had to have a garden, being an outdoor school. So this photo here is a little corner of the school that faces south. It gets sun a fair amount of the year. What you don't see is a massive stand of fir trees about, I'd say, 70 feet south of this corner. So a lot of the year, like in the winter, there's no sun that ever hits this corner. But during planting seasons, it's got pretty good sun. Morning sun is tight against that wall, but it gets really great afternoon sunlight. So it's actually not a bad growing area. It's kind of can get pretty warm there because it's got that 90-degree wall. So we started with this kind of pretty simple, but rudimentary approach to garden making, just trying to kill we get a lot of invasive and quackgrass and all kinds of nasty stuff that we're working with here, and really poor soil that's really just kind of fill. So our only choice here really was raised garden beds. So our first one, we killed off all the grass with the cardboard, as you can see here. We're really lucky to have fantastic neighbors around our school who were very thankful that our school became a school and wasn't sold to people who wanted to make it into a big gravel yard. So they were so thankful they opened up all their barn doors and forest doors and garden gates to us in our school. So that greenhouse is from Len Lazzarato, one of our neighbors. He built it for us and stores it for us every year. And so he comes over with all the parts, and we kind of have an after school session setting it up. So we had a greenhouse kind of right off the bat. We did these little corner garden plots. And I think the next photo, Sonya, will show a little rock bed that we made. Oh no, this is us building a long jump pit at the same time. Oh, here we go, putting up the greenhouse. And then these rocks came from our principal, Isabelle Gervais. They live out in Glen Eden, and their property's just full of large rocks. So they're quite happy to get rid of a few. And we built this kind of little raised rock bed that has more perennial plants in it, mostly flowers, as you can see in the background. And then this is kind of the fruits of our labor from our early garden in the corner of the school. You can kind of see the fir trunks in the background there. But really great process. So we got a garden committee that meets a few times a year. We've got parent volunteers, one in particular, Clea Roddick, who's super passionate about growing, and she organizes all the summer watering and taking care of all the soil that we need and all that kind of stuff. So, but we quickly learned as our school grew, we were K-5 in the first year, then we added 6 and then added 7 and added 8. And of course, with that comes added divisions. So we outgrew these gardens fairly quickly. It wasn't really enough for each class to have one. As you can see from this photo, we completely failed all the recommendations that Sonya just gave you for how to build a raised garden bed. So we got this super thin wood that's longer than 8 feet with no cross beams whatsoever. We only used 2.5-inch screws. I don't know what else, how else we fail. There's many other ways that we failed in the building of these boxes, but
I
super
was
fun.
thinking of that too. Sorry. Yeah. We'll talk about that in the Q&A.
Yeah, I'll get you back for throwing me under the bus there. But you know, I think a negative example is sometimes a positive example. So that's us. They are still standing, so to speak, even a few years later. But this is 3 years ago. We had some community volunteers get some wood for us through Ceren's wife, Serena. And then my class, which then was a grade 6, 7, 8 class, got to work in building, and it was, you know, they had some ideas from the volunteers, but really it was kind of a inquiry-based STEM kind of project for our kids, which they really enjoyed. And so every box is a little bit unique because, you know, they kind of were different groups putting them together. But yeah, really great teamwork and lots of fun, lots of pride from the kids. And that's our kind of end result. So you can see the rock garden there in the corner, and then the greenhouse. And then behind that greenhouse would be that original kind of birch log raised garden bed that we had. The idea was to have one garden bed per class. We now have 7 divisions. We began with 6 divisions. There's pros and cons, and I'll get into that in a little bit about having one garden bed per class. But we got lots of soil donated to our school. And again, we started at the bottom with cardboard, and we had a big work day with the kids who worked really hard in filling up all these boxes with soil by bucket. And a lot of the land had to be kind of, you know, changed a little bit and pretty bumpy. And you can kind of see the quality of dirt and grass and that kind of stuff in the back of that photo there. Once we got all the garden beds all filled up that first year, then we set to kind of organizing. Each class could have a garden bed, and they can do with it whatever they wanted. So this class, you know, doing some quick math, you can only see about, what is that, 12 little squares. So here's Ceren, just fresh off the staff meeting. So that year, or that teacher obviously had partners planting. The next photo, I think, shows that every kid in the class had a little square that they could plant. You can probably imagine some of the pros and cons to, you know, growing a garden bed like that. Maybe not a lot of discussions around companion planting or shade planting or any of that kind of stuff, but the kids can kind of grow whatever they want. One of the challenges with growing at school is the summer, which is the hottest time of year, and death for gardens who don't get water. So who waters the garden in the summer? The other challenge is a lot of the harvesting doesn't happen until the fall. So you do all this work, and by the end of the school year, you've got like this, which is not super fantastic to look at. And then it grows all like crazy in the summer if it's watered. And then the next year you have a different class with you. Your kids have changed. So the kids who planted this garden now aren't the kids that are going to harvest it. So then we try to maybe grow things that are more harvestable and later in spring. And then your gardens set fallow, you know, so there's, yeah, lots of pros and cons, different approaches. We're just changing up the approach actually.
I feel like we try a lot of different things, and I think it's good to see what works for each school, you know. But yeah, sometimes it's like, okay, just plant and leave it fallow. Sometimes it's really involved with parents that are helping out. We've had families help out. Other years we've had teachers that were in charge of watering over the summer. Just take, you know, each teacher takes a week. Yeah, so I think it's I would think that the approach really depends on the community that's involved. You know?
Our new approach this year, which we're just pondering as a staff, is instead of each class getting a box, each class is in charge of all the boxes for a week, let's say, and then the gardening committee can put together a little job list, and then that class can go in there, and then Clea was even saying we could take notes, right? Like all good gardeners take notes. And so you have a set sheet of, like, you know, what we're observing in the gardens, and then what jobs we did, and kind of some responses to that, or just a blank page where they can just kind of write whatever they want for what they did that week. That would also solve the problem of the classes changing next year, because then you don't have a specific box that you were, you know, in charge of for the whole year. It's kind of more of a communal garden. And then we can kind of plant with more product in mind. What do we want at the end? We always do a kind of a stone soup day in our school. So maybe we want to plant things that are linked to making stone soup, which is, I think, this photo of just kind of organized chaos with knives and children and some adult volunteers. Our worst accidents at school have not been knife related. So just wanted to say, but lots of fun. Kids love being in there. We're just in there today. We dehydrated a bunch of vegetables that were gleaned 2 weeks ago, and they're in all the jars. And today we put them all together into soup mixes, and then we're donating them down to Salvation Army. for people who are in need downtown. So that's one of the things on the list for positive outcomes. But so I think, yeah, Ceren's right. Like, it's a lot of trial and error, and every year is different. Of course, the heat dome was not kind to our gardens. And then you've got early springs or late winters, and you've got storms and rainfall, and you've got lack of watering, and then too much watering, and then kids' soccer balls get, kicked in there by accident or on purpose or whatever. And then kids themselves are digging in there at recess. So they're heavily assaulted, I would say, the garden beds at our school. But because the kids are working in them, there is a level of respect there that kids have for the beds, which is nice. Some positive outcomes to having beds. So we kind of made a list. I don't know if you want to read some of these things too. But,
Oh, sure.
now that you're here.
So like this list here, like basically things that are going well with our what we really liked about having school garden. Well, we like seed saving. That's a part of it. We've had some really fun. Another positive thing is having like workshop days where parents have. We're quite tied to our local food security group, the Shuswap Food Action, and they've come and they've led little workshops. So classes would cycle through and do insect hotels and plant seeds, and they made seed bombs. So that was some activities that we did there. We've had plant sales and fundraisers for our school. So we were just talking about that at our staff meeting. But all the classes will plant seeds, and that is a portion of our plant sale, and different families contribute to the plant sale as well. It's classroom space. It's a beautiful, especially when it's in full bloom, it's a beautiful, great place to learn. And there's a lot going on often, you've got insects flying around, and so Emily, Geoff's partner, has used that for her classroom, and different people are moving through using his classroom. Butterfly, we've done like butterfly releases and stuff there. We've set up pollinators, mason bee homes, nests. What do you call them?
Yes.
Exactly. And what else? Yeah, I think those are the main ones. I mean, overall, I feel like it adds just another great for a school that is focused on outdoor learning. It's just another amazing avenue to get kids thinking about systems in a meaningful way, and hands-on learning, interacting with our nature journals. Yeah, I mean, it's just offers so much. It's just endless. So I think it varies the amount that we use it from year to year, and but we all recognize that it's really important for our school in particular to really have one, and it obviously benefits any school, I think.
Yeah. And there's our South Canoe garden story to be continued.
Thank you, Geoff and Ceren. Ceren, this is my educator hat. It's a McQueen Lake. It's like a retro McQueen Lake one, just so you know. This is so you know it's me as an educator. I just wanted we're going to open it up for Q&A in like 1 minute from folks, but there's one slide here that I asked Tessa to put up that actually is a little prompt to just ask you, specifically Ceren, because I believe in some of our like visioning sessions at South Canoe, this resource was really like circled back to quite a bit. And I'm just curious, like, if you don't mind reminding me, why we kind of like use this guide to help us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, essentially. Like it's brilliant. It like breaks it down by grade level, and what you can do with each grade, and it's full of activities. And yeah, we really like it as a staff. I think it's nice if you can have a staff buy-in all together on something like this. That can be tricky even at a cohesive school. But I think it can be used even with a group of teachers as well. If you have, there it is. If you have 4 teachers that are interested in really putting a lot of time into it, they could work together to create kind of like a curriculum, over the course of the number of grades, right? I think that what happens often is that teachers will focus on the same things, like planting seeds in the garden, but and it ensures that composting is talked about, and I don't want to forget the main things, but yeah, you're talking about pollinators. So you got kindergarten, introduction to gardening, grade 1 seeds, grade 2 pollinators and cycles, becoming soil scientists, vermicomposting, composting, rain gardens, you know, but it's broken up by grades. So they are doing different things, but of course, you're still doing a little bit of everything. So you're getting that a little bit of repetition as well, but it doesn't focus too much on one thing. So I really like that aspect of it. It's dead easy, like it's dead. Yeah, it's just super clear, I think. It's not
I bought
dead.
myself a copy after that meeting. I have it on my bookshelf too. It's great. It's easy to read. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Thank you both for taking time to be here. We have just under 20 minutes, and what we've been doing for these sessions is, yeah, we'll take off the slideshow and just let folks ask questions. And I have lots of questions, but I'm going to open the floor to other folks to go ahead. You can raise your hand virtually or like physically if you'd like.
I have a question about growing raspberries. I don't know, because everybody is telling me, oh, they are too invasive. You shouldn't plant them directly in the soil. So I'm thinking maybe I can plant them like in those growth sacks, and maybe that way I will prevent them spreading everywhere.
Tessa, do you know about growing raspberries that well? I
know
haven't done
everybody
some
is
growth
telling me, no, we cannot grow raspberries.
What do you think, Tessa?
I've definitely grown raspberries in a school garden. And yes, they can be quite invasive. They shoot out rhizomes and they keep spreading. I've just managed them in a school garden because raspberries are wonderful to have and really nice for those folks that come in the summer and do watering to have something to snack on while they're there. But different people have different stances on how invasive they want their plants to be in their school garden. The grow sacks, you'd want a really large one for raspberries. So I think the 15-gallon one that Sonya said might support a raspberry. I've never tried growing one in a grow sack. I think water might be a challenge in the summer, just because the intensive root system wouldn't be able to go too deep and be able to keep that grow sack watered throughout the summer to support the raspberry. But I'll look into that and see if I can find an example of someone growing perennials in the grow sacks and how they manage those in school gardens. I don't know if anyone else on the call wants to add to that conversation.
I was wondering if maybe you have other ideas about preventing the spread of raspberries.
I have seen in garden design just dedicating one raised bed just to raspberries.
Oh,
it's
okay.
easier for trellising, and you just have that as a perennial garden bed.
Okay.
So depending on how you're shaping your garden beds and how much available space you have, that can be another way of controlling them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't actually haven't done research on how deep they go, but I don't think you would actually need to make that much of a barrier. Like, I don't think you would have to go that deep below the ground to prevent the rhizomes from going sideways. But that probably is a quick Google search that you could find out. But that'd be interesting. If you find out, let me know.
I'm raising my own hand. I have a question for Geoff and Ceren. And could you tell me how the width of your wood has withstood over the years, and about L brackets?
Oh, thanks for bringing that up, Sonya. Our really skinny, horribly chosen wood is not doing very well. It's warping. The corners are coming apart, and we would love some L brackets if you have some you want to send to us for free, Sonya. I think you're probably actually just signing up for that. So that's great. You're going to support us in the rebuilding of our garden beds. But the wood itself is still whole. It's not cracking, beyond repair. But the corners are definitely a bit of an issue right now, I would say. And the beds are, I guess, going to be 3 years old this spring. So it's still holding the soil, but barely in some corners.
At an outdoor school, you can tell kids as many times as you want to not walk on something, but they were going to walk on it. So that's an obvious place to want to try and balance and walk, especially in the winter when there isn't anything growing there. I mean, they don't feel like they're doing anything wrong. And so having a little bit thicker wood, it just makes it a bit withstand a bit more little feet.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I was just poking because I remember Ceren looking into some L brackets too, to help amend that. There are 2 questions we have in the Q&A. I want to get to those too. And Tessa, I'm wondering if I could direct this first one to you for how many years a grow sacks are good for, since I don't have a lot of experience with grow sacks myself.
Interesting. I don't know. They're probably different, depends on the fabric. You can get different levels of quality. So different grow sacks would be have different lifespans. It would also depend on how much you're growing in them. The water in them and the soil in them are going to slowly break them down. So there was a picture there from an old school where they grow a salad bar from their grow sacks, and that's a year-round production in those bags. But I will share out in our resources. There's a great local company that has a lot of information about grow sacks and their implementation in schools. So we'll share that out on our listserv with our follow-up resources for more information on that.
Thanks, Tessa. And then we have another one here. It'd be nice to like collectively answer this one as a group. So Carolyn's wondering, hi Carolyn, if you have any tips for preparing the soil in garden beds after winter. So first I'm curious, Geoff and Ceren, have you guys done anything in particular, like as we transition into spring here for your garden beds? And then maybe Tessa and I and any of us can kind of get some collective group think on that.
Yeah, we use mulched leaves, so just kind of top dress them with leaves. We bought soil once since then too to kind of amend or up the soil. Is that what we
I
did?
think actually
Or is that pretty
almost every year, maybe every other year, we amend it with a little bit of soil
Yeah.
because it just, the beds seem to get absorbed into the
Mhm.
into the ground. I don't know how it happens. I
And they
look
get
at the science
compressed
of
with
it,
the snow
but
every
we
year
have
too,
always
yeah.
added the compression for
Mhm.
sure.
Mhm.
But then the mulch is really helpful,
Mhm.
and that kind of keeps the weeds out before you plant too.
Yeah. And we haven't never had a compost at our school, so now we have a compost, or we'll have a compost. So that'll be nice to add compost that we're making ourselves into our gardens. But they've grown pretty well,
Yeah.
given the lack of additions. We haven't added any manure to them or that kind of stuff. So yeah.
We've had kind of more like compost wise, we've collected the natural materials, but we've been hesitant to. Salmon Arm has a rat problem, and we have a lot of bears around where we are. So we just, now that we've finally gotten permission from operations, we've gotten a go ahead to keep like food composting, and we're going to trial it on a smaller scale and try and grow it. But we're going to have those rollers, and we'll see how that goes. I actually don't have a lot of trial and error, but I don't have experience with the rollers, but that was the one thing that our district was willing to approve because they can move it if need be, right? It's not permanent in the ground, and operational staff really like that. They like to have control.
So
Mowers,
the Jora,
mowers
is
are
that
very
right?
important.
That the Jora, is it called the Jora roller that you guys have? Are those the
Yeah.
ones?
No,
Or
we
the-
haven't bought it yet. Actually, we
Oh,
on our to-do list. I actually don't know the name of it.
okay,
sure.
that's okay.
Sorry.
I can support you with compost questions if you want. Tessa, do you want to chime into the prepping beds for soil piece too?
Sure. And I was so glad that Ceren and Geoff mentioned leaves. I feel like leaves are a wonderful thing to both add nutrients back to the soil, increase the organic matter in the soil, prevent weeds from growing over winter, and create a nice little mulch for whatever you're growing there in the spring. So really, thanks for mentioning that. Another way to prepare your soil in the fall for spring planting is some schools use green manures, or they actually grow plants in that garden bed over the winter. So fava beans are a really common one in school gardens. And in growing over the winter, they add some nutrients back to the soil, and then they can be folded and stirred back into the soil. There's also some other rye and oats that you can grow. In our October workshop last year, we had a whole discussion around preparing the garden beds in October to increase the nutrients throughout the winter and get the garden beds ready for the spring as well. Sonya also mentioned a tarp for initially killing the grass if you're designing a new garden space, but tarps can also be used to just prevent weed growth. Underneath the tarp, the soil warms more quickly if you're using a black silage tarp, which it makes the nutrients accessible in the soil. It also kills all the weeds under the tarp, so that can be another way of preparing your soil for springtime too.
And I like to always just give a shout out to like low till or no till that soil, just because there are a lot of native pollinators, native bees that can overwinter in those beds, even if it looks like there's not a lot going on in there. If you have like old stems and stalks, like there are critters growing. So I'm always supportive of like a less turnover approach to your soil too, which I think all just been mentioning here. I have one more question, but I'm going to see if anyone else has any more questions before I question as a fellow educator. You have a question.
I have a question for Tessa, just about tarps. Now putting a tarp over a bed, it does control weeds. But does it also, like, can it dry out your bed? I don't actually have an experience with that, but
Yeah, it would really depend on how your bed's connected to soil underneath it. So if it's a low raised bed that's connected to soil and it's raining beside, and you have a nice clay soil, that water is going to percolate into your garden bed. If you have like a planter box that's sandy and there's no water input, no connection to the soil around it, then you'd want to be concerned about that. And yeah, definitely you want to keep all those microbes alive and make sure the soil is moist under there. So it depends a bit on your setup.
Hey, Nikki, I see you have your hand up. Go for it.
I was just wondering if anyone's used or bought any soil testing kits that are kind of geared towards home gardens or classrooms. I'm moving from like farm world to garden world, so I've sent mine into like labs, but I wonder, there's such great tools to be able to use to actually collect data year to year. So I was just curious if anyone's ever bought a kit online or has any recommendations on where to go for that.
I'm just thinking of Amber and like the soil testing kits like for farms, but that's probably not the right spot. I don't know, Tessa or Amber or Geoff and Ceren, if you guys have ever experimented with that.
Yeah, we're just saying no, we haven't ever, like even the pH of our soil, we haven't never tested, but we now have a tester. So that would be something we can add to
Yeah, we have gotten a tester recently. So
yeah.
Nikki, I love that question also with my farmer brain. I'm used to soil testing in that capacity, and yeah, those tests don't mean a lot to students. A few things that I have done with students that are more relatable is do a soil texture test. And the soil test where you like put the soil in a jar, add a little bit of soap and water, shake it, let it filter out. So you see those different layers of silt sand within your soil. And that can be a real visual for students learning more about soil. Oh, it just went on my head. And another test I like to do with students dig into soil, but it's always fun to see the layers in the soil too. So thinking of these kind of more hands-on soil testing that they can do. Oh, another one is soil thermometer is nice for students to look at how that soil is warming up. So bringing kind of science and monitoring and testing in those ways beyond like the full like nutrient spectrum of the soil, which would be great to know and also encourage for schools that are building a brand new garden in terms of soil contaminants if you don't know the subsoil that you're working in. But Nikki, I'd love to hear if you're using a test kit with students and how that goes.
I will update you guys in the next couple of months for sure. Definitely looking for an affordable kit. I've used one in the past, like in high school when I was in a science class. So I'm going to try to track that one down. And I'll let you all know.
Well, we're waiting to see if any more folks put up their hand for a question. I just want to go back to something that was in the chat. There was a question, can you please share some recommendations for raised bed dimensions that are wheelchair accessible? And then thank you, Jenny, for posting a beautiful picture of a raised bed. Jenny, I love that one because it's the same design that I built with a group of students for inclusion garden, and that design works really well. If anyone's intrigued by Jenny's design there, I do have the plans for that raised garden bed that's wheelchair accessible, so I'm happy to share that with anyone that would like that. Last month in our Designing the School Garden workshop, we shared a toolkit around inclusion in school gardens and garden design for inclusion. And so take a look back at the program library from last month. And if any other folks on the call have experience designing gardens and to be more accessible and inclusive, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Thanks, Tessa. I have, oh yeah, okay, yes, we can pass along those the accessible garden bed plans, maybe in our resource follow-up link as well. It was I had a couple of requests for that too. I just have one final thought-provoking question for Geoff and Ceren before we start to wrap this up. I like as a outdoor educator, I suppose I never really worry about ADST like in the classroom, just in terms of like the natural way to build that into like curriculum and flow. But I suppose like with the build process, did either of you really lean into like lesson planning and curriculum content that like specifically was around that design process in terms of like prepping dimensional ideas or like really going over like power tool safety? I noticed in one of those photos, one is with me, but it's like, how do we like prep kids for power tool usage? Like, how did that work? Like if there's pieces there that maybe like there were some learnings from, and and or what came about before that for that piece?
Yeah, that day with that class wasn't the first time they've used those tools. So there's other projects that we've done. And some are a little bit smaller and some are a little bit different. But yeah, we've had tools in our school kind of right from the start and not shied away from having. Like I remember when we had the birch logs, I had, I think, grade 3s that year, and I had grade 3s using a Swede saw to like cut through birch logs. That was the year before, I guess, or the first year. But yeah, I think, you know, it's a process, so it's not like a one-off thing. So it's one of the projects that we did that year. Happened to be the one that had the most bang for your buck, because now we had them still, and the kids had a lot of pride around that. But pretty easy, like I say, to pull up from the curriculum for those kinds of projects. And I don't know, we may not be the best teachers to ask about like curriculum and that kind of stuff, where, you know, we do our things and then we kind of backwards plan a little bit and go, okay, what do we do and how does that link to the curriculum that we have to cover, rather than letting the curriculum pull us along. It's nice to let the kids pull us along, you know, through their interests. But yeah, lots of different ways you could dovetail into that. And we've done lots of great projects. Like one year the Shuswap Trail Alliance was putting up all these big posts, signposts for all the trails in the area. And then we worked with a couple of knowledge keepers from the Sconleth band and did a bunch of carving. So we would carve, I guess, yeah, animals and different things on the front of these posts, working kind of elbow to elbow with these knowledge keepers, which is pretty neat way to spend time with them. So lots of things you can do to access that curriculum. Yeah, especially outside.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for mentioning that like backwards design piece. We've talked about that throughout like this series too, and like thinking about like what is the purpose of this garden space? Like what are you wanting out of it, as opposed to, like you're saying, like finding those curricular pieces and building from there. Even just mentioning Stone Soup, like I know the Stone Soup project is like quite big in District 83 too, and just provokes and also like evokes like more intentional time when thinking about that growing and garden space.
Yeah, I think I'll put a big plug into for the core. I don't know how many teachers are in the crowd today, but the core competencies, like if you look at those main sub competencies, every single one you can basically attribute to gardening in some way, shape, or form. So if you're looking to assess or, you know, see how your kids are doing on collaborating and throwing them all into a garden bed and having them plan things out and work together and make a team plan is a really good way just to kind of step back and see how they're doing. Rather than having to be more contrived in the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if there's a way of finding out how many teachers there are versus farm to school facilitators, but really quickly.
We could put hands up. Anyone quick hands up? I know I see at least like 3 or 4 teachers, like, but
who's a teacher? Put up your hand.
Oh wait, there's some.
I know it's spring break for many districts on the island, so we're missing a few teachers.
So yeah, okay. So I mean, I guess my feedback is if you're a farm to school coordinator, which it seems like this is mostly farm to school coordinator, I think that it's important to recognize that teachers want to know that this stuff relates to our curriculum, right? That's really, they want to be able to tick that box, but I don't think they're going to get in general, they're not going to get super focused on what is the game plan for assessment and, evaluation for ADST. I think they want to make sure that they're hitting outcomes that connect, but I don't think they're losing sleep over that, frankly, no, seriously. And I think that's okay.
Yeah,
I think it's because there's so much to do. There's just so much to do. There's only so much you can do. And I think as long as they know that it fits, then they're going to feel like they're doing the right thing. Of course it fits. I mean, this is great. This book is great for that because it does get into that, but there's so much curricular content. It's ridiculous, Yeah.
Great. Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, thank you. And this is recorded, and we do have quite a few people who watch it too, who are teachers. Like we find it's a blend of teachers and community members and farm to school folks. So thank you once again. We're so grateful for your time. We're wrapping up at 4:30 here, just on time, folks. And we appreciate you making some space if it's your spring break or if it's your last week before spring break. And this is like your very edge of capacity. Thank you. Thanks for Geoff and Ceren for coming, and everyone else here on the call. If you want to stick around, Tessa and I will be here for a couple moments to chat, but please enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.